that's a little longer than some of the other lessons, and it's convenient that we have an extra week that we can take to delve into all of the account here. Before we begin, though, let's start with a word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for all the ways that you are mindful of us. We're thankful for the life and health that we enjoy, for this time that you've set before us, that we can assemble here in peace and in quiet and consider things from your word. We pray, Father, that you will bless our efforts to understand you better, to understand your record, the record of your people, to understand the plans and the part that this period that you preserved for us plays in helping us in this understanding. We pray that we'll be considerate of each other, that we'll find the things that your Spirit has recorded there for us. We'll meditate on them and apply them to our lives where the best be of service to you. Be with those of our number, Father, who are separated from us for reasons beyond their control, or because they're traveling, or because they're ill. I ask that you would be with the circumstances within their life, that you could guide them safely back to our number, to our work and worship together. Especially be with hands that minister to the needs in the meantime, that the things to accomplish their recoveries and their restoration be effective. Forgive us our sins, Father. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. The main judge that we're considering this lesson is Jephthah. Who can remind us briefly who Jephthah is? What tribe? Do you recall? Where's he from? Not aside from the tribe, but as he's introduced to us at the beginning of Judges chapter 11, how is he identified? A Gileadite. I would put it at Gad, because Gad, although the Tob is actually closer to Manasseh than it is to Gad, and it appears that he was run out of town because of his lineage. His lineage was one that was colorful. It's one that was similar to that of Gideon, or not of Gideon, but Abimelech. As his father was Gilead. His father in this particular, there's a Mount Gilead. There are villages that are called Gilead. There is an area that is called Gilead, and now it's also, in this particular case, a man named Gilead. And Jephthah qualifies in all of those things in my mind. He is from this area, Gilead, maybe even a village called that, but certainly his father is that namesake of this area that we're talking about. His father's name was Gilead, but his mother was a harlot, an unknown, not named. And his brothers took umbrance with him, and they sought to deny him any portion of their father's inheritance, and quite literally drove him out of town. And so he takes up residence just outside of this area, I believe, in the land of Tob, which is may have been across the Gad border into Manasseh. Although he could have also been from Manasseh, and just by coincidence had a father named Gilead, because this part of the country is so popular, I guess. But nonetheless, he's not living in this area, and the people in this area seek him out. Why do the Gileadites seek out this exile? Mighty man of valor. Why did they need a mighty man of valor? What was the problem that they needed an army for? The Ammonites. The Ammonites who lived to the east had begun to covet, in particular, the central piece of land that they're fighting over here, this land of Gilead that sits in the tribe of Gad. And they actually crossed the Jordan and harassed the men of Benjamin and the men of Ephraim and the other tribes in the central part on the west side of the Jordan. And they've been emboldened and been making these raids, been making these attacks for some period of time. What's their ultimately when Jephthah agrees to lead the men of Gilead, become their chief, and he sends to the man of Ammon. What's the complaint from the folks of Ammon? What's the pretext for the folks of Ammon to be invading Israel? Tim? Okay. Is this claim, does it have any validity? Okay. This and kind of chasing the heritage of this land. As a matter of fact, this was part of the land that Israelite claimed. It doesn't appear to be part of the original plan that as God was leading His people to the land of Canaan. They were accosted. They were at some point as they elected. You may recall initially that God was going to bring them right into the teeth, right into the land of the Philistines at the south part of Judah, or the south part of Simeon, what would eventually become Simeon and then Judah. That was God's plan A. But the Israelites rejected that plan when they went and spied out the land and became intimidated and didn't accept God's guidance there. And so they wandered in the wilderness, and when they came to take the land, God brought them up on the east side of the Jordan. And they petitioned to go through the land of Edom, and the land of Edom turned them down. They petitioned to go to the land of Moab, and the Moabites turned them down. And Edom and Moab, they have a special dispensation, is at least that they are also related to the family of Abraham. And so God didn't allow them to take up arms. They asked permission, number one, if they could go through the land. And when the Edom and Moab denied the Israelites the permission to go through the land, God guided them around their territory. And so they came up at the extreme east of the Dead Sea, skirting Edom and Moab. But when they came to the land of Ammon, well, Ammon didn't have the same claim that the Edomites and the Moabites had. Plus, they had advanced warning. They had detected the movement of the people, and they decided that they were spoiling for a fight. And so Sihon moved his army out to confront the Israelites, and the Israelites smote Sihon and then Og right above him. And in the process, at least part of the tribes decided, this is pretty good property. I know that we're supposed to settle on the other side of the Jordan, but we like this property a lot. So the half tribe of Manasseh and Reuben and Gad decided to settle in the Transjordan, but continue to fight on with the remaining tribes to be able to conquer the rest of the land. And so, as Tim reminded us, this land was historically, if you count that, but 300 years is getting to be kind of a long time, isn't it? And as it turns out, the people in this part of the world hold these grudges for a very, very long time. Now, this Palestinian land grab of 606 BC begins to stick in their craw, and they decide to go to war with their neighbor. And these things don't tend to be settled. And apparently these people spend a good portion of their history fighting amongst themselves with ownership of particular pieces of property. And the Ammonites are choosing this particular time to raise up, to make their claim. As Jephthah rightly points out, this is 300 years ago. Why now? Why are you waiting until now to exercise your ownership of this land when you could have had it for the last 298 years if you wanted to, but it's been 300 years, and now suddenly you've decided now's the time that you want this land. This this set of circumstances and the land, these men of Gilead sought Jephthah out for his prowess as a valiant warrior. His reputation preceded him. And they came to him with the offer that he should come and deliver them from Ammon. And he begins to set new terms. He negotiates. And part of this negotiation is that if the Lord delivers them into my hand, will I be your head? Now they were seeking a valiant warrior to lead their armies to get rid of the Ammonites, but they were in the mood to go ahead and subject themselves to this. And so they're seeking someone to fill a king-like position, not merely to lead their army, but also to be their head. And this is the agreement, these are the terms that Jephthah set, and they agree to them. As a matter of fact, as when we see Jephthah coming into Gilead, we actually see them in verse 10. the elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, "The Lord is witness between us, and surely we will do as you said." Then as Jephthah went with the elders of Gilead, the people made him head and chief over them, and then Jephthah spoke all of his words before the Lord at Mizpah. So they didn't wait until he delivered on his bargain, but they made him head right off the bat. It's also interesting here that the person that brings up the Lord in this discussion is Jephthah. And this is also, I think, an important reason as to why God is choosing him as a deliverer. What's the state of the relationship between the Israelites and the Lord at this point? Well, the previous chapter has illustrated that they were in distress, that they had called out to the Lord. Did the Lord rush to their aid? No, he didn't. He said, "No, I won't." But the reason being, particularly, is because they were idols. They were worshiping idols. And the children of Israel, despite their lament and despite their recognition, their cry out for deliverance, while they were idolaters, the Lord was not willing to step in, intercede, and help them. And he said, basically in the request, he said, "No, I won't. Take it up with your other gods. Maybe they'll deliver you." Well, the children of Israel repented. They removed the idols from their homes, and they continued to beseech the Lord. And the end of chapter 9, the Lord is he's pained. He can't stand to see them suffer because they are, after all, his chosen people. And he is still working his plans through them. He's still got things that he wants the children of Israel to do, not the least of which is punishing the Canaanites. And so their relationship isn't grand at this point. Their relationship is probably at an all-time low. Jephthah, on the other hand, he introduces the Lord into the conversation and the negotiations with the Gileadites as soon as he can. And he sets the terms that if the Lord delivers them into my hands, will you then make me your chief? And the Gileadites are willing not only accept his term, but also to raise the stakes and to put more skin in the game and saying that we will do as the Lord said. The Lord is our witness. And so I think that this is the reason that Jephthah is being chosen, is among the people in Israel, he is more Lord-minded than perhaps his peers. That being said, that doesn't mean that he lived a life of resounding faith. That's not part of the record. And there's at least some things that he understands about being the people of God. He knows something about the law and, for instance, the weight of a vow. And the weight of something that if the Lord delivers them into our hands, then we will be successful. He understands, he's got a grasp of that, whereas perhaps the other people in the surrounding tribes aren't really thinking in those lines. They're probably thinking, well, we've gotten rid of the idols. Is the Lord going to help us or not? And so we have the stage set here. There is, and one of the questions, question number 3, asks about the rules of engagement in Deuteronomy 20. And as it turns out, Jephthah, these don't exactly apply, but Jephthah follows the rules of engagement as far as going to war. Now, these were special rules. The rules of engagement when they went to the land of Israel, the land of Canaan, well, what were they? If you came to a city and you're going to take it, what were the rules of engagement? Wipe it out. Take no prisoners. Don't strike any treaties. Don't take any booty. Don't let anyone live. Don't look at this as an opportunity to enlist servants. They're to die by the edge of the sword. And this dates back all the way back to the promise that was made to Abraham about it would be hundreds of years before his descendants occupied the land that God intended for them, because one of the stipulations was the iniquity of the Amorite is not yet complete. Genesis 16. The children of Israel are God's whipping. They're his switch. They're the rod that he's using to chastise these people, and he's chastising them with extreme prejudice. Their terms of condition were, for the cities in the land of Canaan, take no prisoners. Exterminate them. But in Deuteronomy 20, if you go to war against a far city, you should first sue for peace. You should first set terms. Find a way to avoid the conflict. But if the conflict can't be avoided, then the Lord will be on your side. And you can plunder them. You can enlist them as servants, any survivors. But these were not the cities in the land of Canaan. These are distant cities. Ammon is on the border. They may kind of apply, and maybe Jephthah is just cognizant of these. Now, this is 300 years in the past. This is 300 years after the conquest of the land and the time of Joshua. But he's kind of following the rules as this being maybe an edge case. And so he says, well, what's this fight about? I like basically as he recounts the history about driving out Sihon and all his people. Basically, instead of just coming out, and Sihon took all the people out, all of his people out, and instead of waiting to be asked if they could go through his territory, he just went out to destroy them. And God delivered Sihon and then Og, and basically let the territory was left up to the initiative of the children of Israel, and they decided to keep it. And Jephthah's point being is while do you not possess what Chemosh in verse 24? Do you not possess what Chemosh your God gives you to possess? So whatever the Lord our God has driven out before us, we will possess that. And he recounts some of the history in Proverbs there. Basically, in verse 27, I have not sinned against you, but what you are doing me wrong by taking war against me. Notice the ownership that Jephthah is taking now. He's agreed to be their chief, their head, and they made him head even before he began this negotiation. When he got back to Gilead, the people of Gilead just declared him as being in charge. And now he's taking full ownership of it. He's saying, why are you troubling my people in my land? So he's assuming that role here even in his language against Ammon. But therefore, you are doing me wrong by making war against me. May the Lord, the judge today between the judge of Israel and the judge of Ammon. So again, it's he states the problem in terms of, well, which God do you serve? We'll see. Is Chemosh in charge, or is the Lord in charge? How did the men of Ammon? Were they persuaded by his argument? Were they appreciate his statesmanship, and how did they accept it? The New American Standard said they disregarded the message. They swept it aside. It's just, okay, he's finished talking now. Now let's get down to business. I like the beginning words of verse 29. What prompted Jephthah to take action? Spirit of the Lord. I want you to say it first. This is interesting. This is only the third time in the book of Judges. And it may be, there's precedent for this. Joshua was described as having the spirit of wisdom. He was, when the Lord told Moses to go out and lay his hands upon Joshua, he already said that he was full of spirit. He didn't specifically say the Spirit of the Lord, but that's the kind of language that the Scripture uses as Moses chose Joshua to be his lieutenant and ultimately his successor. This is the first time it was mentioned. It's been mentioned two other times in the book. Do you remember the occasion? Hint, it both involves judges. Both of them involve judges. The first is Othniel. Othniel against the Mesopotamians. When he took action against the Mesopotamians, the Spirit of the Lord was with him or prompted him to take that action. The second is when Gideon blew the trumpets. The Scriptures also identify the Spirit of the Lord came upon Gideon, and he announced to blow the trumpets, smash the jars, and expose the torches, and to blow the trumpets and initiate the Israelite action against their enemies. This is the third time that it's mentioned here. And this is point being is that it's not mentioned that every judge enjoyed having the Spirit of the Lord guide him, or to even invigorate him in such a fashion. But Jephthah is now invigorated, and so he makes this vow before the Lord, which we'll come back to, and then takes the fight to the Ammonites. How does he do? How would we expect? I mean, when the Spirit of the Lord falls on someone or assists someone with what the Lord wants them to do, success is hard to avoid. And that's the scenario that we had here. Again, it's the way that Jephthah put this, not that, when I take care of this problem for you, will you make me your king? But with the Lord delivers them into my hand, will you make me your head, or your chief? And so there's an expectation here about who's really doing the delivering. And despite the fact that the Lord said, at least initially when they cried out to him, no, I won't help you, he has repented. He has relented he's taking pity on them because of their suffering. And has, through the machinations of men, provided them with a deliverer and has stepped in to actually help the deliverer to have a decisive victory. Basically, at the point where he goes into battle here, he has this, in verse 32, the Lord gave the Ammonites into his hands. He struck them with a very great slaughter from Aurora to the entrance of Meneth, 20 cities, and as far as Abel Keramim. So the sons of Ammon were subdued before the sons of Israel. He doesn't appear to make a call out to everyone, although there's a reference to that in the next chapter, for assistance. He takes the army as the men of Gilead, or the people that he's been able to gather out of Gilead, and he routs the Ammonites and chases them back to their territory, and with great slaughter. And so that sounds like things according to plan. The judge's pattern is restored. The Israelites they fall into sin, they suffer, they cry out. God provides a deliverer. The deliverer restores them, and they enjoy several years of peace under Jephthah. Let's go back to Jephthah's vows here. This is of course a very troubling part of this. Is that what is it that Jephthah vowed? Okay. The thing that comes, the first thing that he sees when he arrives home, having been delivered, having successfully subdued the Ammonites, and coming home into victory, that the first thing that he sees he's going to offer to the Lord. This scriptures don't say why he made this vow. This is chronologically, and this is the way the scriptures unveil it. This is after the Spirit of the Lord came on him, so he's. I don't know how a person feels like that, but they probably feel like they can take on the world. They're probably pretty excited. They're probably like these college football players as they come running out of the tunnel to take the field, with having been pep talked and encouraged by their coaches and intending to have victory for the day. I would imagine that's akin to the excitement maybe that he felt. Maybe he wasn't jumping around and running laps around the field and the frenzy that we see there, but he was imbued with a lot of confidence. I don't know. It doesn't actually describe that. You can see what people do when the Spirit of the Lord falls on them, or the Spirit of the Lord came upon them. We see the kind of things that they did, like Othniel and Gilead, and they enjoyed huge margins of success. And they didn't do that without confidence and enthusiasm on behalf of the leader. I don't think that was something he would just passage. Oh, by the way, Lord, I feel like I ought to make a vow here. Let me see, what can I do? I don't think it was that. It was in his excitement that he made this vow. And I mention that because in our excitement, we oftentimes don't think things through very well. We overextend ourselves. And I'm going to characterize this as probably being part of Jephthah's motivation. He wasn't required to make this vow. He didn't need to do this. Matter of fact, your commentary may say something about a rash vow. And I'm not going to disqualify that. This was something that he made in haste and in the spirit of the moment without really thinking about the consequences. But he meant it. He understood. This is something else about Jephthah's character. See, he understood the weight having made a vow before the Lord, because when you make a vow, God expects you to keep it. It's part of living honestly and walking humbly before the Lord. When you say something, you're supposed to mean, particularly when you make a vow. Tim. Could be. Could be this was that assurance. It's kind of a thing that he did to assure himself by overpromising. You know, this will help me. This will help me to stay motivated. Is it realizing that I've got this vow I've got to fulfill, and this that it'll help also that I don't know. Maybe it was. And again, the times that we're in, Israel isn't very far removed. They've already taken to serving idols in their homes, not just the temples, not just going to the pagan priests. They have the idols in their houses. That this isn't, you're thinking back to Joshua and the keepers of the law and that greatest generation that came in and they honor God all day and all night. This is not those people. This is their descendants, hundreds of years removed, and they are barely distinguishable from like the behavior in the previous chapter. When you were reading about Abimelech, that's a bunch of Canaanites. That's a bunch of pagans. Where's the Lord in that picture? With Abimelech. That's how far these people have fallen, and Jephthah is among them. Jephthah isn't as far gone. He shows a better understanding of what it means to walk with God than the people that he's dealing with. But he's still hundreds of years removed from that greatest generation of Joshua, the conquering generation. And so despite the fact that his relationship with God may have been more mature, it may not. He's not a temple worshiper or a tabernacle worshiper. He's not fully familiar with all the weight of what it is that he's doing. He understands the importance of serving the Lord and is careful to couch his negotiations and couch his statement to the Ammonites in the terms of if we'll succeed if God wills. If God delivers us, if we succeed, then it will be the Lord that delivers us. And as Tim said, maybe he's just reiterating his commitment to that here by making this vow. His motivations are not clear. But he returns victorious, having subdued the Ammonites with a great slaughter. What happens when he gets home? Is she just going out for a walk or going to the well to get something? She's coming out dancing and with tambourines and celebrating. The word has reached her of this great victory. She didn't know about the vow, though. And Jephthah, well, how does Jephthah take this? He's grieved. This is terrible. This is probably the worst. I mean, on maybe the triumphant entry back into the village, returning to his home that he just set up. He just moved his stuff in and moved back to his homeland. And having just gotten set up, now the beginning of the worst day of his life is underway. As his daughter comes out to greet him, and this vow looms. What's Jephthah's attitude toward the vow? He tore his clothes. And it says, alas, in verse 35, alas, my daughter, you have brought me very low. You are among those who trouble me. For I've given my word to the Lord, and I cannot take it back. Now he doesn't tell her about that's not the full statement. I think this is just the news clip version. He explains to her about what it is the vow that he's made. And he's gone from the best day in his life to the worst day in his life in a heartbeat. What's Jephthah's daughter's reaction? My father, you have given your word to the Lord. Do to me as you have said, since the Lord has avenged you, your enemies, the sons of Ammon. So what's on the table is that he's going to offer the first thing that comes to him from his home. It shall be whatever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me when I return in peace to the sons of Ammon. It shall be the Lord's, and I will offer it up as a burnt offering. Now, remind me, the law is full of all kinds of preparation stipulations. What are the rules and regulations for making a human sacrifice? There's no rules for how you prepare your human sacrifice because it's an abhorrent thing to God. This gets maybe into this: can God make a rock too heavy to lift? Kind of ridiculous argument. He can't do anything that would diminish his role as God. He can't demand a human sacrifice when in fact he's this declared that it's abhorrent to him. Michaela? And because of that, you mentioned about the culture around them, and I mentioned that they're not very far removed from the Canaanites. Did the Canaanites practice human sacrifice? You betcha. And they would continue to be a detrimental influence to the children of Israel, even into the time of the kings and the separated kingdom. And God even told them at one time, told Judah, I never occurred to me to tell you not to offer your children to Molech. I didn't think I would have to tell you to do that. You had my law. You knew that I didn't like this. I didn't have to say it out loud. Just the frustration and the fact that this was at the time, it was prior, was at the time, and would be for hundreds of years the practice of the heathen people that lived in this part of the country. Sacrificing their children is not out. That's not off the menu. That's in bounds. Yes, Glenn? Right. Right. That's true. And God. But God did amend that. God did. Keep your finger at that place. But God did amend His agreement about the firstborn. You're right. As it determines the deliverance from Israel, the firstborn of everything belonged to God: cattle, chickens, children. That's right. That's right. That's already. It's already been offered. My understanding. That's ultimately where I'm going, but not because of the firstborn part. I think the Levites replaced. God was willing to take the whole tribe of Levi to be the firstborn of the children, and in the place of the firstborn of the children of Israel. I think those are his turn, because the Levites stood with Moses when Moses came down from the mount. And God said they were willing to take up their sword and to slay people who were engaged in wickedness and iniquity against me, and therefore I claim them as the firstborn. And so I think that those rules about the firstborn were satisfied by the Levites, by God's own terms, God's own amendment to the agreement. But for someone, this idea, though, of how you redeem something that you've already been declared to God doesn't mean that you have to kill it. And that provision is given in the law, that if you can't double it, you can't get a twofer on your sacrifice. You can't offer to something to God as a love offering, for instance, as something that is already belonging to Him. And the offering, and I'll mention this because, as Glenn did here, that her offering is going to be in the service of the Lord, like Samuel was. That whatever it is that she did, there's 3 times here in each one of the closing verses here that are mentioned about her virginity. The fact that she hasn't known a man, and she's not going to know a man because she's now the Lord's. And Jephthah can't give her in marriage because he gave her to the Lord. She can't be chosen. She can't be bartered or tendered in some kind of an agreement as a negotiation between families because she belongs to the Lord. But under the terms of Jephthah's vow. That the real simplistic reasoning in this, if you're reading it like you were a Canaanite, you would say, well, then Jephthah had to go out and slaughter his daughter. That's the only hope. And yeah, it's too bad about her virginity because, he doesn't get a progeny from that. He gets no benefit from that in terms of his family. There's all kinds of other losses that are incurred here, but that he had to spill her blood. Well, that's what it means. He had to kill her before he burned her up. And I'm suggesting to you that the rest of the hints, and not only the law, as Glenn's brought up here, but the rest of the hints in this account tell us that that's not the only solution to the problem. That Jephthah didn't have to take her out on a mountain someplace and offer her up as a sacrifice and burn up the remains. This is difficult. This is dicey. And again, we're hundreds of years removed from the people that were really, really serious about keeping the law every day. Joanne. And that is as and it's like many of the offerings of the Lord. As that offering to the Lord means you surrendered control over it. That whatever the Lord wants is what happens. I don't think that would please God. He has to make a full surrender. It's as though she were a burnt. He didn't say, I'm going to burn her up, but I'm gonna offer her, the surrendering here, I will offer it up as a burnt offering. And that's burning her up. That's one way of doing it. But he is surrendering a full surrender of her, losing whatever lineage that she had, and her not bearing any children into his family, and that her apparently he's going to spend the rest of her life outside of Jephthah's house. Even if that life is this afternoon or until she dies as a virgin. That she's continued to be mourned in this fashion, and that she asked for this period that she could go with her companions to mourn her virginity. Isn't just, I think, the loss of life isn't the only way of understanding that. I have difficulty in saying this language could be interpreted as a burnt offering, except for the fact I know God hates that. Not that he hates burnt offering, he hates human sacrifice. His stipulation to Moses, or to Noah after the flood, one of the stipulations in Genesis 9 is an eye for an eye. And anyone that takes the life of a thing is required, that life is required of them. Thus, even establishing the rules of why an animal sacrifice, the life that the animal sacrifice represents, is suitable as a suitable patch or a suitable interest payment to God for the sin that's incurred by the offerer. Complex passage. Again, I can't, just reconciling it all together, God hates human sacrifice. He's willing, as Glenn said, to sacrifice a human being's life in service to me. That's Those are some of the terms of them being a nation to begin with. They started out as the firstborn of everything belonged to God to do with as he pleased. No matter what your plans were for your son, if he's the firstborn, son or daughter, he belongs to God. He or she belongs to God. They're God's property. That's what the initial term. I think God meant, he renegotiated that when he took the entire tribe of Levite as a supplement to that. If you go back and read that term, read that account in Exodus and Deuteronomy, you'll find that the Levites are standing in for the firstborn of God, God's unique and own property to do with as he will. Don't make any plans for the Levites. I've got them covered. They belong to me. Every child, firstborn, secondborn, every child born to a Levite belongs to me. Those are our terms. And so God could accept a human sacrifice in the terms of service. There's already a precedent for that. There's no precedent of God demanding a human sacrifice. No, he did with Abraham, but we know that object lesson changed. And as a result of that, what did God tell Abraham? Now I know that you believe that I'm the Lord. By Abraham's willingness to go the distance, even offer up the son of promise when instructed to. I have difficulty seeing Jephthah putting his daughter on the altar and burning her up to God here, because God hates this. It's one of the things that he specifically says that he hates about Canaanite worship, is they burn up their kids. That's true. I agree with that. No. This account by itself, this account does not say that they didn't burn her up that afternoon or after 2 weeks. Wasn't it 2 weeks? 2 months. Tim? Yeah, that's true. But it is, as Dave says, wholly offered. And that's, it is wholly offered. And the New American Standard renders it as a burnt offering, or like a burnt offering. It is wholly and completely. There's nothing recoverable from a burnt offering. No portion of that you can claim for your own. It's given in its entirety to God. And that's as the New American Standard renders it as a burnt offering. And those weren't the terms, as David pointed out to us. Those are not the terms that God selected. God selected, or those are Jephthah's terms. And I'd also like the point that Tim made. This is something that he dictates is coming out of his home with an expectation that it may actually be a human being. Yeah. And they both, whatever Jephthah and his daughter, whatever action is taken, they both are complicit in this. They both agree. They do not rebel against God. they keep this vow. But again, the difficulty I had in a grisly murder and burning the remains is that God is specifically on record as opposing that. But he's also specifically on record as saying when you make a vow, you're expected to keep it or make this kind of correction or rash vow. But that's not brought into the record here. Good discussion. Thank you. Lots here to unpack, as Tom likes to say.